Hello, and welcome to the Just In Case workshop. So this is a quick 10 to 15 minute, we'll see how long it goes, workshop for helping you work past just in case, how to recognize what it is and when you are falling into the just in case trap and how to move past it. Okay, so if we haven't met, my name is Krista Lockwood. I am the founder of Motherhood Simplified, and I teach moms like you how to declutter. We have 5 kids, 2 toddlers, 3 big kids, and everything I teach you is how I have decluttered and how I have stayed clutter free, right? And as you can see, we have stuff, we have things. We don't live with nothing. I don't think that you need to become a full-blown minimalist when you declutter. And actually, as moms, I think that's usually just one more unfair standard that we have to live up to. Now, that's not important. Let's talk about just in case. Let's talk about how to recognize when you are holding yourself back from decluttering because of just in case. So just in case can look like literally saying, I'm going to keep this just in case I need it, right? Just in case something happens and, we need the thing. Or it often looks like what if, right? When we say just in case, we're like thinking of specific times and events that it might happen. But sometimes it's also what if, what if something happens? What if I need this? What if I get rid of it and I end up needing it? And we're going to walk through this in the exercise of how to actually work past just in case, but that's what it looks like. So let's talk about a specific example. Kaylee's crying. Let's talk about a specific example that I love to talk about because you can probably relate. Kitchen gadgets. Instapots, crock pots, rice cookers, slow cookers, and those kinds of things. Now, we used to have a couple crock pots and a rice cooker and an Instapot. And I was convinced that I needed all of them just in case, honestly. Like I used them for some things sometimes, but there was never a moment in my life where I needed all 4 of them at once, which is why I was keeping them. I was keeping them just in case one broke, just in case one was dirty, just in case I decided to have a whole lot of people and needed to make 4 things at once, right? Which, isn't a horrible thing to have, but it is if you are overwhelmed, right? Like I was. I had too much stuff to manage, and I was coming up with all of these reasons and justifications for keeping everything. I couldn't even fit it all into my kitchen, and so I would do things like try to figure out how to store things better, or to create more storage, or to be more organized, or to fit all of the things that I had into a space that they didn't fit into because my kitchen wasn't big enough to hold that many appliances, right? So if you don't know our story, we moved from Alaska to Florida in 2013 with only 1 suitcase per person, and I did not bring all of those with me. And nothing bad happened, right? All of those imaginary scenarios in my head were just in case, and what if I need all of these crockpots and Instapots and rice cookers at once never ever happened. And that's the reality of just in case, is that it's us living in this made up future in our heads, thinking of all of the worst case scenarios of things that can potentially happen, and then holding on to all of our stuff in the now and suffering in the now because of it. Now, this is the thing, just in case, when we think about stuff, these scenarios, we are coming up with potential, honestly, pretty insignificant events that are minorly inconvenient and aren't really detrimental to anything, and coming up with reasons that we should keep that stuff, right? If there's ever a moment in my life where I need 2 crock pots, an Instapot, and a rice cooker all at once, that's not a crisis. It's not something that is going to be detrimental. I can make by with 1 crock pot, or I can make rice in a different way, or I can make my food in a different way, or I can plan my cooking time in a more efficient way so that instead of making everything all at once, maybe I'm spreading it out, right? Like, and that's the thing, is that nothing bad is going to happen. I can get resourceful, and there are alternative options, right? Nothing bad will happen. And on the other end of it, I want to talk about kind of a heavier subject of when we are in crisis, when something bad really does happen, we never are reaching for our piles of clutter, right? If anything, our piles of clutter make the crisis even more difficult. So think about that and think about how your clutter affects your day-to-day life. Just in case has us hold on to things for a potential minor inconvenience in the future, and we forget that it's making our everyday life extremely difficult, draining, exhausting, overwhelming, burdensome. All of these negative things in the right now. So you have to choose. Do you want to maybe be potentially inconvenienced in the future? Worst case scenario, you have to borrow a crock pot from a friend, right? Or you have to get creative in how you cook, right? Or do you want to free up your time and energy and space right now? Which one do you want? So let's dive into the Just in Case workshop and actually talk about how to work through this yourself. So in your worksheet in the Clear Your Clutter PDF, you will have the Just in Case workshop. So when you are decluttering and you find yourself saying, I want to keep this just in case, or I want to keep this because what if I need it in the future? I want you to ask yourself, do I need it? And if the answer is yes, say when. When exactly will you need this stuff? When specifically will you need it? And when specifically will you need all of those things, right? So say you're keeping 50 coffee mugs just in case, or what if I need it? When are you going to need 50 coffee mugs or 100 coffee mugs, right? Or multiple food processors or clothes that are in bins that you haven't worn for 5 years. When are you going to need it? And when exactly are you going to use it? And if the answer is maybe, I don't know, just in case, or some imaginary scenario in your head, write that down, right? If it's a maybe, when specifically would I have a use for all 4 of these things at one time, right? And if you have a kitchen that fits all of the appliances and it's easy for you and you're not overwhelmed, it's totally okay to keep all of those things. But for a lot of us, we have too much and we're overwhelmed by it. And instead of getting rid of it, we're trying to find ways to keep it and to justify keeping it and to create space that we don't really have for it in our homes, right? Now, what might happen when you start to do this is that you can have a little bit of fun with it. Okay. So example, say you have 50 coffee mugs and you're like, but I need them all. When is the moment in your life where you need 50 coffee mugs? Either you invite 50 guests over or you break all 50 coffee mugs in a day and then you can't have coffee in the morning, right? When are you actually going to use all of this stuff? And you probably won't be able to come up with a very simple, obvious moment in time in the future that you might potentially need it and you might be minorly inconvenienced without it. All right, so it's okay to have fun with this. And I don't think for the most part you will find a very clear answer for if and when that moment in the future will be so detrimental that it's worth taking up your daily space and life and making you totally overwhelmed in your own home. So that's the point of that. Now, the next thing that I want you to do after you've asked yourself those questions is ask yourself if you have alternatives, right? If you get rid of your 2 crock pots or your Instapot or your rice cooker, what are other ways you can make rice? On the stove, right? You can make it on the stove. You can make it in the Instapot. You don't need a rice cooker and an Instapot. They do the same thing. So it's just a matter of, again, going back to that question of, is this minor convenience worth it to me? Or is it better for me to have space cleared up right now? Okay. Now, the next question is, what would happen if I needed it and I didn't have it anymore? The example here, we're going to stay with all the kitchen examples today, is a pie pan. It seems to be one of the things that I always declutter and I always end up needing. And we move a lot, so it usually doesn't make the cut into our essential kitchen items, and I don't have room for it in our kitchen bin. So I get rid of the pie pans. But inevitably, once a year, my kids volunteer me to make a pie for school or something, and I need a pie pan. So what do? I go get a pie pan. You can get it from the thrift store. You can borrow a pie pan from a friend. You can make a pie pan and a cake pan and nothing bad will happen if it's really a pinch, right? Like, what is going to happen if you need the thing and you don't have it? 99.9% of the time when we get rid of something for just in case or what if, it's a super minor inconvenience like that. Nothing bad happens. It's minuscule. And again, going back to what I talked about earlier, is that when you do have a crisis, The things that you are reaching for are not your piles of clutter. It's not your extra dishes. It's not that stuff on the stairs. It's not that holiday decor that you don't even like stored in the closet. When you are in crisis, you're looking for time, energy, money, resources, community support, emotional support. You're not looking for your clutter. So get really clear about what you're actually going to need in the future. And if you do have a crisis, how important it is to have your house clutter-free. So ask yourself that. What are my options? What are my alternatives? How can I get creative? Who can I borrow from? What will I do in this scenario? Because a lot of times when we have a true crisis, like I said, we aren't looking for the extra crock pots that don't fit into our kitchen. Okay, now, the final question that I want you to ask about just in case, and it applies to things that we typically have large quantities of, not maybe like one of. But what would happen if I just reduced the amount I have instead of all of it? Now, the reason this is important is because a lot of times we fall into the all or nothing trap, right? We think that we have to get rid of it all or get rid of none of it, right? And when it comes to things, we'll talk about the kitchen again, like utensils. You don't have to get rid of all of your extra cooking utensils. What if you just got rid of some of them? What would happen? You would have less. And go back to those initial questions. What if I get rid of it and I need it? What if I get rid of half of my spatulas and I need more? What are you going to do? You're probably going to go get more, right? But you probably won't even need more. We're just used to having it around. And we get so trained into thinking of the worst possible case scenarios, not realizing that our worst case scenarios really aren't that bad, right? So what if you just reduce the amount that you had? What if you reduced it by half? What if you reduced it by a third? What if instead of 100 coffee mugs, you only had 50? And now, again, for the sake of just having fun with it and thinking about all of the things that could go wrong, terribly wrong, right? Speaking of terribly wrong, what if you only had 50 coffee mugs instead of 100? What would you do? What would happen if you broke all of those coffee mugs in a day? What would you do? You would probably go get more coffee mugs. So, on that note, I'm like you guys, I'm not trying to hide anything here. They're at the end of their rope. I hope that this was helpful for you. Use the worksheet when you get stuck. Ask yourself these questions and get really, really clear on if it's worth you keeping around in your home right now for the potential what if maybe it could happen, slight inconvenience in the future. Because ultimately that's what just in case and what if in all of its forms comes down to. I'll see you around in the group.